and welcome to Security Fundamentals. My name is Sarah Alali, I work at Microsoft and I will be your trainer for this session. I have a PhD in computer science and over 10 years in teaching, training and also in conducting research. And I have a passion, guess for what? It's for technology and I love to learn new things. Security and compliance are essential aspects of any organizations that deals with data and information. Security refers to the protection of data and systems from unauthorized access, use, modification, or destruction, while compliance refers to adherence to laws, regulation, standards, and policy that govern how data and information are handled. This course covers 6 different sessions. You are encouraged to watch one or more sessions. In session 2, we'll explore the function, identity type, and authentication capabilities of Microsoft Entra ID, along with the capabilities of Microsoft Entra, including access management and identity protection and governance. So let's start. This session is broken into 4 lessons. We will start looking at the function and identity types of Microsoft Entra ID, then moving on the authentication capabilities of Microsoft Entra ID, followed by access management capabilities of Microsoft Entra ID. Finally, we will be talking about identity protection and governance capabilities of Microsoft Entra. Let's go! Let's start with the first lesson, looking at the function and identity types in Microsoft Entra ID. So this lesson will talk about what is Microsoft Entra ID and talk about different identity types we have in Microsoft Entra ID. Microsoft Entra ID, formerly Azure Active Directory, is a Microsoft cloud-based identity and access management service. Organizations use Microsoft Entra ID to enable their employees, guests, and others to sign in and access the resources they need. It provides a single identity system for multi-cloud and on-prem applications. This can help you meet your governance requirements. And now, if you already have any of these products in your organizations, things like Microsoft Office 365, Dynamics 365, the Azure portal, and any SaaS application used by your organization, then you automatically have Microsoft Entra ID tenants running in the background. Microsoft Entra ID include Identity Secure Score. This helps you to objectively measure your identity security posture, plan identity security improvement, and also review the access of your improvements. When you ask the question to what can I assign an identity in Microsoft Entra ID, there is 3 categories. There is the human, workload, and devices. Let's start by the first user, which is the users or humans' identities. Examples of identities assigned to people are employees of an organization that are typically configured as internal users, and you have also external users that include customers, consultants, vendors, and partners. For our purposes, we will refer to these users as identities. Then you have the second category of users that you can assign identities to, and they are software-based objects such as applications, virtual machines, services, and containers. These identities are referred to as workload identities. Workload identity enables the software workload to authenticate and access other services and resources. In Microsoft Entra, workload identities are service principal and also managed identities. A service principal is essentially an identity for an application that delegates its identity access functions to Microsoft Entra ID, while managed identities are a type of service principal that are automatically managed in Microsoft Entra ID and eliminates the need for developers to manage credentials. The third category that we have of users are that you can assign to are identities to physical devices. such as mobile phones, desktop, computers, and IoT devices. Device identity can be set up in different ways in Microsoft Entra ID. We have the Microsoft Entra ID registered devices that this provides user with support for build or bring your own device or mobile device scenarios. We have Microsoft Entra joined. This ID or this represented device that joined the Microsoft Entra ID through an organizational account. And lastly, we have the hybrid Microsoft Entra ID joined devices. These devices are joined to your on-prem Active Directory and Microsoft Entra ID, requiring organizational account to sign in to the device. Many organizations are a mixture of both cloud and on-prem applications. So Microsoft's identity solutions span on-prem and cloud-based capabilities. This solution creates a common user identity for authentication and authorization to all resources regardless of location. We call this hybrid identity. Hybrid identity is accomplished through provisioning and synchronizations. Now, the Enter Directory provisioning is provisioning identity between two different directories or directory services systems. For a hybrid environment, the most common scenario for Enter Directory provisioning is when a user already in Microsoft Active Directory is provisioned into Microsoft Entra ID, while the synchronization is responsible for making sure identity information for your on-prem users and groups is matching the cloud. One of the available methods for accomplishing Enter Directory provisioning and synchronization is through Microsoft Entra ID Connect. Microsoft Entra ID Connect is designed to meet and accomplish your hybrid identity goals for the provisioning and synchronization of users, group, and contact to Microsoft Entra ID. Okay, so let's move to the portal and see Microsoft Entra ID and look also about the user settings. So to see the user settings, we're going to admin.microsoft.com. So in here in admin.microsoft.com, we could find in the admin centers, we could find identity. So it's going to redirect us to intra.microsoft.com. And we are in our demo tenant console. Then we have users where we could check all users, and we have a list of users that we could see, and we're going to pick Adele Vance. Once we picked Adele Vance, we have an overview of basic information about Adele Vance, the user, principal name, the object ID, the user type, its member, identity. Also we have group membership, how many groups they are part of, application, and also assigned licenses. We could go to monitoring to check users signed in, and we see there is 2 signed in. We could look into properties where we will have further information related to that user, the name, the address, the postal code, the password policies, any control that we have. Also create date time, last time the password was changed, more information related to job information. So we have pretty many information related to this user. I could also look into the sections. So we have the audit logs, we have the sign-in logs. So if we need information related to logs, we could grab it from this user. We could look at the assigned roles. So currently, which rules are assigned to that user. We could also add an assignment if we want to. We could select a specific rule that we want added as a privileged identity management rule, so Microsoft Entra rules. I could also look into groups. I could add membership. I could also select and remove membership if needed. I could configure the application, licenses too. I could manage from here the license. I could see also the activate license that exists in this user. I could also manage devices once devices are added. Here we didn't added any device yet. I could look into Azure role assignment to this user, and also I could look into any authentication methods that we want to use. We will further our discussion about the authentication methods later on. That's it related to this demo. All right, let's move to the second lesson. In this lesson, we are going to look for authentication capabilities of Microsoft Entra ID. And within this lesson, we'll talk about authentication method, and we'll look at multi-factor authentication and password protection and management capabilities of Microsoft Entra ID. Let's have a look at the authentication method now. Passwords have been a primary method for authentication for a very long time, and we still utilize it on one of the forms of authentication. However, they have many problems, especially if used in single-factor authentication, where only one form of authentication is used. If they are easy enough to remember, they are easy for a hacker to compromise. Strong passwords that aren't easily hacked are difficult to remember and affect user productivity when they are forgotten. What we can do, you can use a secondary methods to allow you to authenticate yourself to different services by using a device that you may hold with a phone call and SMS to validate it. Could be a better way? Well, we do have other options that are considered even better than using your personal device. Things like using open protocols that can allow you to connect to services using Microsoft Authenticator app that can allow you to authenticate yourself every time you log into a secure site or service. We do have better ways than all of this to log into some of your services and to authenticate yourself by using passwordless features. We have Windows Hello that allow you to log into your device and authenticate you on your local device as you log in. Now, sometimes I get asked, why do you think this is the best method to log in or authenticate yourself? Simply because this service authenticates me with my local device by using my facial recognition, and once it logs me in, it doesn't ask me for any authentication, user, and password for any service that are associated with my account. Also, you could still use Authenticator app to log in without password. You can use your fingerprint or facial recognition on this app, and they can authenticate you and authenticate your access, which can be secondary form for authentication on some of this. Finally, we have also fast identity online services or a certificate-based authentication that you could use. We can also use multi-factor authentication along with our services. We did mention different authentication methods. Some of those were primary and secondary methods. Here we are talking about multi-factor authentication. We want to use more than one way of authenticating ourselves just to make sure that the user that's trying to log in is challenged enough to ensure as they are who they say they are. To do this, we use multi-factor authentication. Now, multi-factor authentication relies on three main areas. One of them talks about something you know, and typically this is what we spoke about in terms of password, PIN, memorable words that you are aware of. Apart from that, you would also want to have an understanding of something they could have, and here we spoke about having a mobile device or smart card. Finally, we want to ensure that we have something that they are. Basically, this is identifying an individual using their biometrics. Could be a voice recognition or facial recognition. So putting those together in a mix will ensure that we have challenged strongly users that are trying to log into a service. Next, we have security defaults, an excellent choice for organizations seeking to enhance their security but unsure of where to begin, or for those using the free tier of Microsoft Entra ID licensing. These security defaults are a set of fundamental identity security measures endorsed by Microsoft. When activated, this recommendation will be automatically implemented within your organization. The objective is to ensure that all organizations achieve a foundational level of security without incurring additional costs. These defaults enable some of the most widely used security features and controls, such as enforcing Microsoft Entra multi-factor authentication, registration for all users, requiring administrator to utilize multi-factor authentication, and ensuring all users complete multi-factor authentication when it is needed. Password protection is a feature of Microsoft Entra ID that reduces the risk of users setting weak passwords. Microsoft Entra Password Protection detects and blocks known weak passwords and their variants, and can also block other weak terms that are specific to your organization. Default global banned password lists with known weak passwords and their variation are automatically applied to all users in Microsoft Entra ID tenant. You can define entries in a custom banned password list to add organizational specific terms such as brand names and product names. When users change or reset their password, these lists are checked to enforce the use of strong passwords. Microsoft Entra Password Protection helps you defend against password spray attacks. This protection is based on real-world security telemetry data from Microsoft Entra ID, which is used to build the global banned password lists. For hybrid security, admins can integrate Microsoft Entra Password Protection within an on-prem Active Directory environment. Now let's go back onto Microsoft Entra ID and see authentication method and MFA. So here we are going to look into authentication method. So we're going to stay in intra.microsoft.com. We're going to go into protection, so opening protection, and here looking for authentication methods. So here you found different policies, and we have in the policies different authentication method policies that you could use. For example, if I grab Microsoft Authenticator, I could target where I'm going to enable it. For example, I want to enable to all users, or I want to select some specific groups, and at that moment I add the groups that I want to add. For example, all company or all employees. Or I could keep it with all users while excluding some groups. So I could say I exclude communications and also group from this. I could also configure other configuration for this authentication method policy. So I could, for example, allow use of my Microsoft Authenticator OTP, or I could require number of matching or show application name in push-up and passwordless notification, etc. I could also look into other authentication methods, for example, SMS. And here I have an information saying this authentication method delivers a one-time code via SMS and to a user phone, and user then input that code to sign in. So I always have here a small descriptive, whatever the the method that I'm going to choose. So here in the SMS, I have this information that is saying what I could do. I could exclude users after enable it. So in here, I could choose which user to be included and which users could be excluded. Always in the policies, so I could also look into, for example, voice call. And here, same, I have an information saying this authentication method places a phone call to a user, which the user must then approve using the telephone keypad. And same to same, I could include, exclude, etc. So we have also password protection. So in this authentication method page, where I could configure the lookout threshold. Here we have 10. I could look, it says how many failed sign in are allowed. I could, the duration in second, here's 60 seconds. I could also configure custom banned passwords list. That once I accept, I could, for example, remove anything related to Contoso or any label to the company that I want to remove it. I could also enable password protection on Windows Server Active Directory if I want. So I could extend it, and they have different mode, either enforce or audit, depends to what I really want to do. We have authentication strength also. And here I could look into different way to make authentication strength, multi-factor authentication, passwordless MFA, phishing-resistant MFA. I could add others if I want to. I have just to give it a name, description, and I could configure it regarding what I want to do. Also, I could look into the activity, and here I have information related to registration. So I could look into user capable of Azure multi-factor authentication. I could have also other information. So here, multi-factor authenticator, software token, etc. So I have it in a really great graphical way. I could also add filters and configure this dashboard. I could look also into the usage, and by adding filter, I could have a good dashboard that gives me meaningful information regarding what I need to do. User registration details. Also, I have information related to registration details. I could look into registration and reset events if I want to. Also, in this module, we want to talk about authentication, and we'll cover also MFA in the demo, but let's really take a minute to show basic settings in multi-factor authentication. So we get back into protection and go into show more. And here we want really to look into multi-factor authentication. So here we have the getting started in here. So it gives me ways to get started in multi-factor authentication. And I could look into account lookout, so a number of multi-factor authentication denials to trigger account lookout, how minutes until account lookout counter is reset, and how many minutes until account is automatically unblocked. I could look into the users that are blocked and blocked, so I could add a user and decide a reason to block a user manually if I want to. I could have also fraud alert. I could configure it. I could allow users to submit fraud alert. I could decide automatically block users who report fraud or not. And I could decide how to code the report fraud during initial greeting. I could look also into notification, and here's I could add an email address of an admin that's going to receive notification. So there is others things that you could see onto this, but let's keep it fundamental since this is a fundamental course. All right, let's move to the third lesson of this course. Here we are going to explore access management capabilities of Microsoft Entra. Now, within this class or this module, we will talk more about conditional access and its benefits, and we will look at what are Microsoft Entra rules and how they differ from rule-based access control, or in short, RBAC. Now let's start talking about conditional access. What is conditional access? If you consider the word conditional access, maybe it tells you that it's giving someone access based on some conditions. And that's exactly right. We are talking about allowing people access based on their different conditions. In this case, we'll talk about something referred as signals. Conditional access policies are if-then statement. For example, a conditional access policy may state that if a user belongs to a certain group, then they are required to provide multi-factor authentication to sign into an application. A conditional access policy in Microsoft Entra ID consists of two components: assignment and access controls. With the assignments, admin can determine which signal to use. The assignments portion of the policy controls the who, what, where, and when of the conditional access policy. If you have more than one assignment configured, all assignments must be satisfied to trigger a policy. You could look at some of the assignments in the slide if you want to have more information. When the conditional access policy has been applied, an informed decision is reached on whether to block access, grant access, or grant access with extra verification, or maybe apply a session control to enable a limited experience for the user. Microsoft Entra Admin Center now includes a new set of capabilities grouped under the heading Global Secure Access. The Global Secure Access is the unifying term used for both Microsoft Entra Internet Access and Microsoft Entra Private Access. Now, Microsoft Entra Internet Access secure access to software as a service, SaaS applications, including Microsoft services, public internet app, while protecting users, devices, and data against internet threats. Microsoft Entra Private Access provides your users, whether in an office or working remotely, secure access to your private corporate resources. Microsoft Entra Internet Access and Microsoft Entra Private Access come together as a solution that covers zero trust, network identity, and endpoint access control so that you can secure access to any app or resource from any location, device, or identity. This type of solution represents a new network security category called Security Service Edge, or SSE. Now let's have a look at Microsoft Entra Rules and Role-Based Access Control. Microsoft Entra Rules control permission to manage Microsoft Entra resources. For example, allowing user accounts to be created or billing information to be viewed. Microsoft Entra supports built-in and custom rules. There are many built-in rules for different areas of responsibility. All built-in rules are pre-configured bundles of permission designed for specific tasks. A few of the most common built-in rules are Global Administrator, User Administrator, Billing Administrator. However, if you are not happy with the long list of all built-in rules, you can create your own rules, and we refer as custom rules. Also, for Microsoft 365 services, Microsoft Entra has added some service-specific built-in rules, each of which grants administrative access to a Microsoft 365 service. This means that Microsoft Entra built-in rules differ in where they can be used. There are three broad categories. First, Microsoft Entra specific rules. These rules grant permission to manage resources within Microsoft Entra only. Second, service-specific rules that grant permissions to manage features within the service like Exchange Administrator, SharePoint Administrator, and so on. The third, we have cross-service rules. These rules span services. For example, Microsoft Entra has security-related rules like Security Administrator that grant access across multiple security services within Microsoft 365. Now, please remember, we spoke about Zero Trust in Module 1. We want to always ensure that we allow least access or privilege to users in all environments. So, not just to make users administrators. If they needed to carry out a task, provide them with a role that gives them access to handle only their task. Now, apart from talking about Microsoft Entra ID rules, we wanted to talk about role-based access control. Now, what is the difference between the two? Microsoft Entra rules control access to Microsoft Entra resources such as users, group, and applications, while Azure rules control access to Azure resources such as virtual machines, storage, and they are using Azure Resource Management Platform. All right, time for a demo. So let's have a demo for Microsoft Entra conditional access. So let's, in this demo, get interested into conditional access. So we are going to stay in intra.microsoft.com also for this demo. And also we are going to get interested into protection. And in protection, we are going to look into conditional access. Here in conditional access, really, we want to focus on two policies. And in policies, so let's create a new policy to see what we could do great thing with conditional access. First of all, you give a name to your policy. I'm going just to write this is a policy, but really give it a name that you could read it after all, understand what this policy does. First of all, assignment, and we here are working on the if condition. So we have the if, we said it's if then. So here in the assignment, we're working in the if, and access control will be the then. So here in the if, we have users. So you could select this policy would be applied for all users, or you could select really some users or some groups, for example, guest or external users, and I decide to select them all or group of them. Or I could say I will include all users except some users, which is directory roles, for example. So this are going to not be applied on application administrator. Then when you decide which users we are going to apply the policy on, you're going to really think of which is the resource that I'm going to target. So in here, I could say it's Cloud App, User Action, or Global Secure Access, or Authentication Context, depends on. For example, for Cloud App, I want maybe to look into all Cloud App, or I want to select some apps. So let's assume we are putting it into all Cloud App, but I'm going to exclude by adding a filter. So in my filter, I could, for example, say I'm going to choose an attribute. I'm going to add an expression by explaining what not to block. Or I could manually select an application. For example, I am going to exclude it for Microsoft Admin Portal and maybe Office 365. Once I did so, I could look, for example, into the network, and in here I'm going to look into which network I'm going to implement also this. For example, any network or location, or maybe I will apply it for all trusted network and location, or I apply it everywhere except trusted network and locations. Once I decided with that, I could go to conditions. In condition, I will find also the location, which is impact the network also, but I could find other control access. For example, user risk. I could configure it and say, okay, I want to apply it for high and medium user risk. I could look into the sign-in risk, and we already explained it in the course what does it. So high and medium, for example, risks, and insider risk assess the user's risk data related activity in Microsoft Purview insider risk management. We'll be talking about it later on. So in here, I could say, for example, elevated or moderate risk. We talked about location network. We have also clean app. And I could say if my user is connecting from browser or mobile app and desktop, so I'm going to be cautious with that and apply the policy. I could filter for devices, and here you need to put an expression looking into what exactly I want to choose. For example, device ID, manufacturer, and then I choose what to apply on that. And we have also authentication flows. So I could say I want to configure authentication flows, and in that moment, should I transfer method to device code flow or authentication transfer? When I have configured all my if statement, now I move on to the then. And that moment, I have to look into the control. So should I block the user or should I grant the access while giving like limited experience, requiring multi-factor authentication or requiring device to be marked as compliant, or let's give more verification. Or I could go more into a session control, and at that moment I will say I will use conditional access app control only. Once you configure the if then you could enable a policy, so by on is going to start right away, or I will put it into reports only, and in that moment it's going to just sending me some notifications. So this is mainly if I want to test the policy. All right, that's all what I wanted to show you for the demo. Let's get back to class. All right, lesson 4. In this lesson, we are going to talk about identity protection and governance capabilities in Microsoft Entra. Now, within this lesson, we'll talk about identity governance in Microsoft Entra, and we'll be talking about what is access reviews and privileged identity management. And we will talk about the capabilities of Microsoft Entra identity protection and permission management. And finally, we will talk about the Microsoft Entra integration with Microsoft Security Copilot. All right, let's start. When you are an administrator that manages identities in a company, many questions might come into your mind. Which users should have access to which resources? What are those users doing with that access? Are these effective organizational controls for managing access? And can auditor verify that the controls are working? To address these key questions, Microsoft Entra Identity Governance gives organizations the ability to govern the identity lifecycle, govern access lifecycle, and secure privileged access for administration. So let's start with identity lifecycle. Managing users' identity lifecycles is at the heart of identity governance. When planning identity lifecycle management for employees, for example, many organizations model the join, move, and leave process. When an individual first joins an organization, a new digital identity is created if one isn't already there. When an individual moves between organizational boundaries, more access authorization may need to be added or removed to their digital identity. And when an individual leaves, access may need to be removed, and also identity may no longer be required. On the other hand, access lifecycle is the process of managing access throughout the user's organizational life. Users require different level of access from the point of which they join an organization to when they leave it. At various stages in between, they will need access rights to different resources depending on their role and responsibilities. Finally, privileged access lifecycle, when employees are assigned administrative rights, there should be a governance process because of the potential for misuse. We also have access reviews. Access reviews in Microsoft Entra ID enable organizations to effectively or to efficiently manage group membership access to enterprise application and role assignment. Users' access can be reviewed regularly to make sure only the right people have continued access. Admin who created access reviews can track progress as the reviewers complete their process. No access rights are changed until the review is finished. When the review is complete, it can be set to manually or auto-apply changes to remove access. Also, the reviews could go with a multi-stage access review process. Microsoft Entra Access Reviews support up to 3 review stages, in which multiple types of reviewers engage in determining who still needs access to company resources. Now, apart from that, we want to talk about something called Privileged Identity Management. Privileged Identity Management, or PIM in short, is a service Microsoft Entra that enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to important resources in your organization. These include resources in Microsoft Entra, Azure, and other Microsoft Online services such as Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Intune. PIM mitigates the risk of excessive, unnecessary, or misused access permissions. It requires justification to understand why users want permission and enforce multi-factor authentication to activate any rules. When we talk about PIM, we refer to a just-in-time access, providing privileged access only when needed and not before. We talk about time-bound, by assigning start and end dates that indicate when a user can access resources. We look for having an approval-based system requiring specific approval to activate privileges, making this access visible, sending notification when privileged rules are activated, and looking for access who are auditable, allowing a full access history to be downloaded. Did you know that Microsoft analyzes trillions signals per day to identify potential threats? And in 2023, Microsoft have blocked an average of 4,000 Microsoft Entra brute force authentication attacks per second. These signals come from learning Microsoft has accurate from their position in organizations with Microsoft Entra ID, the consumer space with Microsoft accounts, and in gaming with Xbox. The signals generated by these services are fed to identity protection and then can be used by tools such as conditional access, which uses them to make access decisions. So, what is identity protection? Identity protection is a tool that allows organizations to accomplish 3 key tasks. First, automate the detection and remediation of identity-based risks. Second, investigate risks using data in the portal. And finally, export risk detection data to third-party utilities for further analysis. During the detection phase, it calculates the sign-in risk and the user risk. In the sign-in risk, we look into the probability that it wasn't performed by the user. On the other hand, for the user risk, we look into the probability that their identity has been compromised. And we categorize risk into 3 tiers: low, medium, and high. Then, in the investigate risk phase, identity protection provides organizations with 4 reports that they can use for or to investigate identity risk in their environment. After this phase, we have the remediate phase. In this phase, organizations can enable automated remediation using the risk policies or manual remediation, where an administrator must manually review the identified risks in the reports. You can finally move to the export phase, where data from identity protection can be exported to other tools for archive, further investigation, and correlation. Now let's talk about permissions management. Microsoft Entra Permissions Management is a cloud infrastructure entitlement management product that provides comprehensive visibility and control over permissions for any identity and any resource in Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, and Google Cloud Platform. Permissions management allows customers to address three key use cases: discover, remediate, and monitor. In the discover use case, customers can assess permission risks by evaluating the gap between permissions granted and permissions used. Then, in a remediation use case, customer can right-size permissions based on usage, grant new permission on demand, for example. In the monitor use case, customers can detect anomalous activities with machine learning-powered, ML-powered alerts and generate detailed forensic reports. Great news! Microsoft Entra now integrates with Microsoft Security Copilot. Businesses using Copilot and with the right user permissions can benefit by activating Microsoft Entra plugin. With the Entra plugin enabled, security analysts can instantly get risk summary, steps to remediate, and recommended guidance for each identity at risk in natural language. For example, analysts can use Copilot to guide in the creation of a lifecycle workflow to streamline the process of creating and issuing user credentials and access rights. Microsoft Entra capabilities in Copilot are built-in prompts that you can use, but you can also enter your own prompt based on the capabilities supported. Microsoft Entra integration with Copilot can also be experienced through the embedded experience referred to as Microsoft Copilot in Microsoft Entra. I know you feel really curious about how to integrate it and how to work with it, and what is this standalone experience and embedded experience that you see in the slide? Don't worry, we'll be talking about it in much detail in the next session. In this session, we explored the services and identity types of Microsoft Entra ID, along with the capabilities of Microsoft Entra ID, including authentication, access management, and identity protection and governance. Remember that all these materials is available for free on the learning path at aka.ms/SC-900. This concludes our session. There are many ways to continue your learning journey. We encourage you to watch other videos in this class or search out your next favorite topic on Microsoft Learn.